Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Right next to me we have Dr. David Knox. Welcome back to the show, David. It's good to have you back.
Appreciate coming.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on. Here in the near future, he will have, and over in the wings, we have John Cornett. Welcome back too, John.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it very much. Good
we were out for a couple of weeks and had pre-recorded shows because the studio was closed around the 4th of July, and they have boys and girls clubs that come in on the week after that. But tonight we have our Hemp News segment. Dr. Knox is here to talk about his upcoming event, Doctor's Knox event, Introduction to Endocannabinogy. And so we'll be talking about that and taking your questions. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Yep. So we're starting out with our Hemp News segment tonight. Our first section tonight, first story, is out of Washington, D.C. Federal agencies fewer total marijuana plants in 2018, but made more arrests for cannabis-related offenses, according to annual data compiled by the Drug Enforcement Administration. According to figures published in the DEA's Domestic Cannabis Eradication Suppression Statistical Report, the agency and its law enforcement partners confiscated an estimated 2.82 million marijuana plants nationwide in 2018. This represents a 17% decline from the agency's 2017 totals and a 66% decline since 2016. Driving much of the difference over the year decline was a nearly 40% reduction in the seizure of outdoor plants in California, which fell from 2.4 million in 2017 to 1.4 million in 2018. Adult use retail sales of cannabis began in California in 2018. Separate data published recently in the journal Ecological Economics identifies an association between the passage of adult use marijuana regulatory laws and the reduction in the number of grow operations in national forests. However, while the total number of plants fell in 2018, seizures of indoor cannabis plants nearly doubled, rising from 304,000 plants in 2017 to just under 600,000 in 2018. The agency also reported 5,632 marijuana-related arrests in 2018, a 20% increase over 2017 figures. The agency reported over 52 million in confiscated assets in 2018, more than twice what the agency reported in 2017. Jurisdictions reporting the greatest number of total plant seizures in 2018 were California with 1.8 million plants seized, Kentucky with 418 million, Washington State with 112,000. I should say 112,000. Mississippi had 70,000. West Virginia had 68,000. Our next story is also from Washington, D.C. Members of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security heard expert testimony on Wednesday challenging the federal government's policy of cannabis prohibition. The hearing, entitled Marijuana Laws in America, Racial Justice and the Need for Reform, debated the merits of various alternative policy options, including abolishing cannabis's long-standing Schedule I criminal status under federal law. The hearing marked the first time in decades that members have entertained debate regarding the need to end federal criminalization of cannabis and deschedule the plant from the Controlled Substances Act. Archive video of the proceedings is online. A coalition of social advocacy groups released a joint statement of principles to coincide with the hearing. The principles, which were entered into the record, highlight legislative priorities and provide Congress with a roadmap for ending America's ongoing policy of cannabis criminalization. For the first time in a generation, members of Congress engaged in a candid conversation that acknowledged the failures of marijuana prohibition in the United States, how this policy has adversely impacted tens of millions of Americans, and how it must be reformed at the federal level. The ongoing classification under federal law on cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance, a categorization that treats it in the same manner as heroin, is intellectually dishonest and been scientifically debunked. It is high time that Congress address this flat earth policy and move forward with a plan that appropriately reflects marijuana's rapidly changing cultural status in the United States. Also from Washington, D.C., the total number of financial institutions willing to work directly with state-licensed cannabis businesses continues to grow, according to quarterly data provided by the U.S. Treasury Department. Since the close of last year, the number of banks actively servicing marijuana businesses increased over 10%. The total number of credit unions servicing the industry rose by nearly 20%. Federal law discourages banks and other financial institutions from maintaining relationships with marijuana businesses because the plant remains classified as a Schedule I controlled substance. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, fewer than 500 financial institutions nationwide currently provide services to cannabis-specific establishments, all of those being small local banks. Members of the United States Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs are scheduled to hear testimony next week regarding the need to provide greater access to financial services for state-licensed marijuana-related businesses. The Senate hearing, titled Challenges for Cannabis and Banking Outside Perspectives, will take place on Tuesday, July 23rd at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. It marks the first time that members of the Senate have officially considered the need for banking-related reform. Federal law and regulations currently discourage banks and other financial institutions from working directly with state-licensed cannabis businesses. Members of the House Committee on Financial Services, Subcommittee on Consumer Protections and Financial Institutions, previously heard testimony on the issue in February. For an industry seeking legitimacy and requiring transparency, the inability to obtain banking and credit access remains a primary but unnecessary roadblock. In order to truly bring the marijuana industry out of the shadows, actions need to be taken by Congress to amend these outdated and discriminatory practices. This legislation, H.R. 1595 and Senate Bill 1200, the Safe Banking Act, is pending in both chambers to create new federal protections for financial operators who work with state-compliant marijuana businesses. The House version of the act, which was passed out of committee earlier this year, has over 200 congressional co-sponsors, while the Senate version has 31 co-sponsors, which is a great number. However, I'm afraid that the establishment of this rule might lock in some onerous regulations, and I think the best thing to do is just to deschedule cannabis, which will take it out of federal law completely, and that would solve the banking problem. That'd be the best way to resolve that, in my opinion. Our next story is about another congressional committee in Washington, D.C. Members of the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry will hear expert testimony next week regarding the production of industrial hemp and hemp-derived products. The Senate hearing, titled Hemp Production in 2018 Farm Bill, is scheduled to take place on Thursday, July 25th at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Representatives from the United States Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and the National Hemp Association are among those who will testify in next week's hearing. In December, Congress enacted legislation removing industrial hemp, defined as cannabis containing less than 0.3% THC, and products containing cannabinoids derived from hemp, from the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Under the law, states that wish to license commercial hemp cultivation must submit their plan to the USDA. Last month, the agency filed a notice in the Federal Register indicating its intention to finalize regulations governing the licensed production of industrial hemp by late August. Separately, the FDA is discussing options regarding the regulation of hemp-derived CBD products, which it currently states may not be legally marketed as either nutritional supplements or food additives. We call on the FDA to clarify confusion among both consumers and regulators with regard to the legality of certain CBD products. We recommend that the FDA move expeditiously to provide regulatory guidelines governing the product's manufacturing, standardization, and quality. Our next story is from Spain. Subjects with a history of cannabis use are less likely than abstainers, people who completely abstain, to develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, according to longitudinal data published in the journal Progress in Neuropsychopharmacology and Biological Psychiatry. A team of Spanish investigators assessed the relationship between cannabis use and liver steatosis over a 3-year period. They determined that those subjects who reported continuing cannabis use were at lower risk for developing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. They concluded, quote, "Our results suggest that using cannabis could have a protective effect on liver steatosis. The beneficial effect of cannabis is at the level of development of steatosis seems to be its secondary to its modulation effect on weight gain and the reduced development of obesity. The results are in line with previous studies in the general population in which cannabis showed significantly lower non-alcoholic fatty liver disease prevalence compared to non-users," end quote. This study, Cannabis Consumption and Non-Alcoholic Fatty Liver Disease, a 3-year longitudinal study in first episode non-affective psychosis patients, appears in Progress in Neuropsychopharmacology and Biological Psychiatry. Our next story is out of Miami, Florida. Acute pancreatitis. Patients with a history of cannabis use have lower hospitalization costs and possess lower rates of inpatient mortality than do those without exposure to cannabis, according to data published in the journal Pancreas. Researchers with University of Miami Leonard Miller School of Medicine assessed the impact of cannabis exposure on acute pancreatitis-related mortality, morbidity, and cost of care. Health records of over 2.8 million subjects with acute pancreatitis were analyzed for the study. The investigators reported, quote, "The cannabis-exposed group had significantly lower inpatient mortality compared with the non-cannabis group. Cannabis-exposed patients also had decreased length of stay in hospitalization," end quote. The authors concluded, quote, "Cannabis-exposed hospitalized patients with acute pancreatitis had lower age-adjusted mortality, morbidity, and hospitalization costs than non-cannabis exposed patients," end quote. Findings are consistent with prior studies reporting that a history of past cannabis use is associated in hospital mortality among patients admitted for heart attack, traumatic brain injuries, burn-related injuries, and those hospitalized with other forms of severe trauma. This study, the impact of cannabis consumption on mortality, morbidity, and cost in acute pancreatitis patients in the United States, a 10-year analysis of the national inpatient sample, appears in this month's edition of Pancreas. And that's the end of our Hemp News segment for tonight. John Cornett is ready to play a song. Hey, John.
Yes, sir. I got a song by a guy named, see, I can barely read this. Ben Scales, looks like he wrote this back in April 2002. And I can really relate to this one. I don't know about you guys, but I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. I've got a little posse pot growing all over the lot. Growing marijuana in my yard. Yeah. Got me lots of seeds from Mexico. Stuck them in some dirt and let them grow. I put them in my garden with my peppers and my peas, and I get all the smoke I need for free. So I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. We'll keep it where no one can see, so let's keep this between you and me. I'm growing marijuana in my yard. So I grow my own medicine in my yard. Give some to my neighbor for his heart, and share it with my grandma who keeps it from her son. Cause we all know that stuff's against the law. Believe it? Still against the law some places. Now there's nothing growing in my yard. Cause cops took all my land and both my cars. Now I have to buy my pot from a teenager in a parking lot who's growing marijuana in her yard. Anyone can grow it in their yard. I can show you how, it ain't hard. Never mind the president, let's overgrow the government and all grow marijuana in our yards, yeah. Let's grow some marijuana in our yards. Do it, do it.
That was a nice rendition of that. Pretty cute song. Welcome back again, David.
All right, thank you, Paul.
So you and your family have been doing presentations just all over the world. I know your wife and daughter are off in the Virgin Islands right now.
Yeah, it seems like they're getting to travel and make all these presentations around the world, and I have to stay home and work. You know.
They're a little bit cuter than you.
Yeah,
but,
I know.
You know, and you know, I was surprised, maybe our viewers didn't see it, but there was an 80-foot tall poster of your daughter on the side of a building in downtown Portland.
Yeah.
That must have been quite something to see.
It was quite fun, you know.
She gave a talk at the TED Talks here in Portland. We have a video from that we'll show in a little bit.
Okay,
We'll wait a little while on that.
All right. Yeah, well, that was just kind of a lead-in to the subject of our event, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here and just shamelessly promote our event.
I'm glad you're doing so. It sounds I bought a ticket.
All right.
So I'm excited about it as well.
Yeah.
So you have an event coming up, an introduction to endocannabinology at the Jupiter Hotel. It's coming up on the morning of August 3rd.
Right, Saturday morning.
Right.
And, you know, so hopefully it's a convenient time for folks, and it's a pretty good venue. I think you know, we got the ability to sit, you know, range 100 people or so, and we just trying to get a little more information out, you know, to the medical community. Basically, the presentation is somewhat designed to, you know, speak to physicians and naturopaths, chiropractors, other medical professionals. You know,
so medical professionals can get what they have to have on an annual or biannual basis, the continuing medical education credits to keep their licensing.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've just recently, I know, received accreditation.
Absolutely. It was exciting when we applied and we were able to get accreditation to, you know, offer, I think it's a couple hours of continuing education credit.
CMEs
CME.
for the medical people. Is that just for doctors and naturopaths, or can RNs do that? Or
I think if it's accredited, that you can apply, use it for whatever your professional organization is.
To any of those medical professions that require
you can
that.
Claim the hours. So.
Yeah.
You know, usually it's like 50 hours a year we've got to have, but you know, every little bit adds up. You know.
So I know you have this event coming up. It's just a couple weeks out, and your daughter or wife or maybe both will be here next week as well. But if someone out there has questions for Dr. Knox about medical marijuana, the endocannabinoid system, the exocannabinoids like cannabis and related cannabinoids, then they can call us and ask questions. So just call us at 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. We'll be taking questions for about the next 35, 40 minutes or so. So.
Yeah, it's, we're terminating an introduction to endocannabinology, and I think, you know, Rachel's TED Talk was kind of a lead into that. You know, what we say, it's the study of the endocannabinoid system,
and that was just discovered about in the early 90s.
Absolutely.
So
you know,
they found it regulates the rest of the endocrine system, right?
Well, absolutely. It's involved with virtually every other system in the body. We call it the maestro, or the conductor. You know, it's influencing and modulating, you know, certainly all our neurotransmitters, our immune system, you know, so it's involved in everything from birth to death, really. And
it's part of the first secretions of maternal nutrition, or before lactation or milk starts flowing.
Absolutely.
What is that called? The colostrum. The colostrum that women produce that gives the baby the munchies.
Absolutely, absolutely. It stimulates suckling in the baby. You know, it's involved in reproduction from the point of implantation. You know, to delivery.
So by that you mean like it helps the sperm enter the egg, or opens the coating of the egg somehow, so that the male gamete can fertilize the egg.
It involves our endocannabinoid system every step along the way, in some way or another. It's a body's own upregulation or downregulation of anandamide and the other transmitters and the receptors and everything. So it's always a little bit in flux, but there's just so many aspects to it, so we're in order to get accreditation, we kind of got to really stick to the scientific information that we have about the physiology, how it works, and I think it's important that as medical professionals we have a good understanding of the physiologic system, and then we can start looking at how everything else influences our endocannabinoid system.
So if our patient, a medical marijuana patient out there, has a doctor who doesn't understand how this works, then they could come and not only learn about it, but obtain credit that they'll need to meet their annual CME requirements to keep their license.
Yeah. So I think we've been in this situation, with the illegal status of it, that physicians, I was never taught anything about it other than it's a drug of abuse. And as these things are evolving now, the patients are way ahead of us. I mean, they are using it. So, whether a physician, knows much about it or condones the use of it in his patients, they are using it. And we got to understand, the physiology. We got to understand interactions with other medications. Need to know really how it works. So
I know the first time I ever saw anything officially from a medical provider on the interactions of cannabis is I'm a disabled veteran, so I had sprained my ankle, which is part of my disability, and went up to the VA hospital, and they gave me Vicodin for the pain, just like 2 or 3 days worth, which was helpful. It's pretty severe pain at first with the sprain. But in the documentation they gave me about warnings and precautions, the warning for cannabis from the Veterans Administration Hospital in the early 90s was increased pain relief. That's all it said. So I was surprised to see valid information out of the VA so early.
Even back then they were admitting, yes, it does help with pain relief. That's what we see.
That was actually before we had medical marijuana legalized as well. We have a studio audience here, and you folks out there watching are welcome to come down and join our studio audience. And one of the privileges of that is there is a microphone here in the studio, and you can come up off camera and ask a question. And John came up to the microphone, so he must have a question. Go ahead, John.
I sure do, for Dr. Knox. I want to run and tell all my doctors right away, because they tell me they don't know about it. They don't have time, to go study it. So I'm curious, because I know there's a stigma attached to it too. How can what can I tell them to help them overcome the stigma about going to seek out studies? Is there still a stigma attached to it, where the regular doctors who go to the social club, they don't want to be seen hanging out with people who advocate for cannabis usage?
Well, I think we're seeing some changes there.
We are?
Probably a lot of docs will say, I don't know enough about it to really make recommendations, or they're also in institutional situations. They work for a big health organization. Their policies are, basically anti-cannabis. They're not allowed to sign authorizations, and like I say,
credit though for this.
Yeah. So historically, they just do not get involved with it.
They're afraid that it will hurt their license with the DEA and their ability to practice medicine.
Historically, that's been their fear, but I think it's been more and more disproved. That this is not jeopardizing my DEA certification. To prescribe other medications, drugs, even opiates. And
back about 2005, Kaiser Permanente did what was the largest epidemiological study of cannabis patients and non-patients. They had over 100,000 marijuana users and 100,000 non-marijuana users, and they found it benefited the patients, and they authorized their doctors, at that time just in California, Oregon, and Washington, to recommend medical marijuana. So Kaiser has said that, but many doctors at Kaiser will say, you know, our hospital won't allow us. So they're just saying that.
Right.
Really, their hospital recommends
Does
it.
recommend, okay.
But
Yeah.
that's what they are told. Are they? Someone told them, or they believe that just
Right.
because of.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
the
I think
stigma.
it's part of the policies that they have in place. You know that they don't want you to be combining cannabis with other treatments and things. You know, they're concerned about the interactions possibly. But I know certainly with the pain management clinics through Kaiser, that seems to be one of the tougher ones for cannabis patients to continue to get their opiate prescriptions and things.
Yeah.
So,
That's unfortunate.
Yeah,
It's unfortunate
yeah.
that they won't allow patients that they've really addicted with these opioids to use cannabis in helping them get off of that. We have another audience question. A gentleman at the microphone. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Micah, and I'm very interested about how cannabis affects the brain. I'm really interested in what you might know about how it affects the corpus callosum or the pineal gland, or just the way that it all interacts. These are things that are very fascinating to me, and when I use cannabis, it seems to affect them.
Mm-hmm. You're asking for a simple answer to a very complex question.
What's the most interesting thing that you think people should know about how cannabis affects the pineal gland or the corpus callosum and the way that we...
If I was a neurologist, I could probably give you a little more specific answer to that. But
If I had known that question was coming, I could have pulled up the articles
Absolutely.
from the online source that I've been using for about 20 years. It has a rather unusual name, but it is constantly growing in annual and semi-annual increments. It's called Granny Scarecrow's List. And so with Granny Scarecrow's List, you can look up any condition or any gland and find out the latest studies over a long period of time, on specific substances. So after the show, let's look up cannabis on Granny Scarecrow's
My
list.
usual disclaimer is I'm just a dumb ER doc, And
You recently retired
I'm
after what, 40 years
40
in the
years,
ER?
yeah, 40 years emergency medicine.
So you've seen everything.
Well, no, you never
You saw a lot.
Yeah.
How many people did you see come through the emergency room saying, "I took marijuana, I need your help"?
Very few.
Very few.
Very few. That's
But there
what
were a few.
A few, yeah. Kind of a number of cases we could talk about.
They ate too much.
Significant problems and side effects. Usually, too much edibles that they weren't ready for.
That's usually what it is.
But it's not a totally benign substance.
Right.
It does have some toxicities and things. But
I've seen about 1 out of 1,000 patients. It seems to set off a pre-existing tendency towards schizophrenia and a psychotic reaction.
Yep, there's some risk
And
for
so
that.
that's about 1 out of 1,000.
Exactly. There's some circumstances, whether genetics set up for it or that type of thing, and we don't know all the details about that. But we have to recognize the risk of it as well as the benefit side. But in comparison, in my experience in the emergency room, it was a rare occasion we saw a problem related to it. And every day we're seeing half a dozen alcohol-related problems, half a dozen opiate-related problems, chronic pain problems. I mean, it's just a tiny fraction of really what
these other things cause, right.
compared to the other drugs.
It's much safer by far. We have another audience member. It looks like Judy. Go ahead, Judy.
Hi, Dr. Knox. Thank you so much for being on the show again. You're always so informative. I am so excited about this event you're going to put on.
Appreciate it.
I have a question for you with regards to pain management, and it's not on the individual basis, but it distresses me. Among other things, I consider it a very, very big issue that this country has made a very, very big issue about the opioid epidemic without anybody caring about the real pain management people that need real amounts of pain management. And in our state, we have major institutions that are fighting against us. OHSU is an enormous problem for many people.
And OHSU, excuse me, Judy, I just want to jump in because you said that. I got an email just this week saying that OHSU was going to have introduction to cannabis for their doctors, and that this was their third one. And the first two, according to this email, were big successes, and over 100 doctors had come to this hour-long presentation. Didn't you folks go to OHSU?
I think it was, last year, and I think they have another one in October of this year.
Maybe that's what they were scheduling here.
Yeah, some introduction.
But I just have to throw that in there.
It goes to the question that I had, which is, whatever is happening at the national level, why don't we see any kind of push within our own state to support cannabis for pain management more than just a one-liner at the end of a story or something that gets mentioned in there? You know, it just isn't being done, and I wonder if doctors are receptive, if any professional groups are doing anything other than the Knox family, which is a force unto yourselves. Thank you.
Well, we're trying to be a force.
Becoming more and more of one.
But yeah, we're that's why we're doing our event. We want to try to help get that information out there. We spent a lot of time studying it, and we think we have some handle on the literature. But I don't have enough time to read it all, and
sure.
There's still a lot of complexities to it. But yeah, as far as the opiate epidemic. And what we can do to manage that, the federal government, FDA had a hearing on that, and hours about, we could do this, we could do that, not one word about cannabis, not one word. And
that's the solution to so many of the problems, not just the medical problems, but our environmental problems, our social equality problems, our world pollution problems, our deforestation problems.
I mean, so many things it could solve. But again, as far as the opiate epidemic, I love Dustin Sulak. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a physician, a DO out of Maine, who's been active in the cannabis sphere. He's presenting at CanMed conference in September, I think. He's made presentations all over. But you can find it online.
So that's the one that's coming up here in Portland in early September?
No, I think
that's Cannabis Science. The other one is CanMed.
But I'm just saying, he has been out there speaking as well. And I told him I want to just plagiarize his talk about, the use of cannabis to solve the opiate epidemic. Because we've got supporting studies, as synergistic. Opiates and cannabis means you get better pain relief with a lower dose of opiate. It also seems to block the progressive need for increasing doses and dependence on opiates. And what got me started, in this program, it was just apparent from the get-go, the number of patients I'm seeing who are able to reduce or get off their opiates with the use of cannabis as a substitute. And
that's being reinforced every week with new studies and new
totally being
science.
So,
we are going to run a little video here. We have about a little less than a minute video with our friend Jorge Cervantes, introducing a video that will be out maybe by the next show, talking about how to grow huge cannabis plants. We'll be back in just less than a minute.
Randy, let's do the math and see if it pans out to do us a double cage. So we did that and we said, oh yeah, if we get even 10% more or 20% more, we'll be paying for all the materials and the labor and still doing better.
Excellent, excellent. So you've got two cages here. Could you explain that to me, how that works?
We're trying to make the plants wide.
Okay.
It's not about tall, because if you just have a tall, skinny plant, everything underneath it is shaded. So we're trying to get maximum exposure for the sun, kind of like your sea of green or anything like that.
Okay,
so
okay.
It's about the width, not the height. Some of them get tall anyway, you can't help it.
Right, there's one right behind you. It looks like it's about 12, 14 feet tall right now.
Yeah.
Welcome back. That's our friend Jorge Cervantes. You can go to his site, marijuanagrowing.com, for more information about what he's doing. So your event is coming up on August 3rd here in Portland at the Jupiter Hotel, kind of in central East Portland.
Right.
And
East Burnside.
So for people to find out more about that, it's the best way for them to call the doctorsknox.com or go to the website.
Our website is doctorsknox.com/events. And so that'll have all the information about the
So you have a
event,
sliding scale. So OMMP patients can come in and see this as well. I know I got a little discount for being an OMMP patient.
Yeah,
and
good.
you said some scholarships are available
Right,
for
yeah.
low-income patients as well. So if you're
So
a
that's all-
low-income OMMP patient, you can apply to get a scholarship to be able to go as well.
Yep.
See how many is available.
All right, so it should all be available on that website, you know, all the details. You know, ladies have basically put it all together here. And, I don't know the details, but it's, it's all up there. And
So your wife first started working with us, and then you came on board, and then your two daughters came out of medical school, and they were interested in integrative medicine.
Right.
You want to explain to our patients what integrative medicine is?
yeah, well, integrative medicine is, you know, basically kind of integrate it all. You know, we got our allopathic medicine, you know, which is kind of the standard in the country. But we also have a lot of nutritional components to it. You know, food's our first medicine. You know, the nutrition is key. Diet makes a huge difference. Just as an aside, you know, we're looking at things like the ketogenic diet. One of the main ketones that's formed is butyrate. Butyrate attaches to the cannabinoid receptors. I mean, so they all tie together. You know, we also, you know, talk about mind, body, spirit. You know, the endocannabinoid system ties it all together. You know, when we look at other modalities like acupuncture, Eastern medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, they all have influence on that endocannabinoid.
They all have insights
Absolutely.
that go beyond Western medicine.
Absolutely. So we try to integrate it all and, you know, help people, you know, kind of find that that mechanism that's really going to help them lead a more healthy life.
We have a video with your daughter on KGW just before her appearance at the TED Talk. And she's talking about her TED Talk, which was about 10 or 12 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, I think, you know, 15-minute range.
The presentation you're going to make here is going to be 3 or 4 hours at the, is that right?
Right.
It's what is
Yeah,
it,
it's
9
three
to
hours. Yeah, so we have
9 to noon.
Yeah, basically we have a you know, kind of a lecture and then almost the equivalent amount of time just for question and answers, and you know, delve into more little details about things people want to know more about.
Okay, so let's run that video from KGW introducing Dr. Knox's daughter, Dr. Rachel Knox, who's also the co-chair or chair of the Oregon Cannabis Commission, appointed by the governor to help make recommendations regarding medical marijuana. So we'll be right back after this 3-minute video.
In focus this week on Sunrise, I'm sitting down with some of the innovators who'll take the stage at TEDx Portland on Saturday. So this morning, I want you to meet this woman. She is Dr. Rachel Knox. She comes from a family of physicians. She works with her mom, dad, and sister, and they call themselves the Knox Docs. Rachel's passion is medical cannabis, and she travels the world educating people about its benefits.
The reason I was approached to give a TED Talk was because here in Portland, nobody's ever given a TED Talk around cannabis. Yeah, and I've made it my life mission almost to be an advocate as a physician, as a medical doctor, to talk about the science of cannabis and how it applies to the science of the body for health and healing.
So what do you mean the science of the body? Like, what specifically do we need to know about that?
Well, you got to watch the TED Talk for that. It's a secret.
It's a secret.
Yes, but I am going to reveal the secret to health and healing. And the clue is that it has to do with cannabis.
How in the world did you get involved in that particular area? Going through medical school, I don't think that was probably one of the courses, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. You know, in medical school, and I went to medical school for a dual degree, so in medicine and in business. And so I learned about the business of medicine, and what I realized was that the way the bureaucracy of medicine runs is sort of paradoxical to health, and I wanted to be a healer. You know, I didn't want to be a drug pusher, and so I had to find somewhere in the middle where I could thrive. And I went into family medicine, intentionally looking for an integrative medicine track in a residency program, and I found it. And I was introduced to the healing arts and just, you know, fell in love with plant medicine and ancient healing practices. And that really inspired me. And while I was in residency in North Carolina, my parents were here working with patients with cannabis, and it just piqued my curiosity.
Okay, I know there are a lot of fabulous speakers, but girl, I saw your billboard. You are everywhere. That is fierce. What did you think when you saw those?
It's pretty incredible. And I went with my friends to go sort of celebrate it being on the wall. And I can tell you when I drive by it now, it's like seeing it all over again. It's 50 feet of me. It's kind of crazy.
Well, it's fabulous.
Thank you.
I cannot wait to hear the secret of your TED Talk. We'll be watching.
I'm excited to share.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Come on back.
Okay, TEDx is this Saturday, the 27th, and you can still buy tickets. We have a link for you on kgw.com. Plus, KGW is going to live stream that event on Saturday on all of its digital platforms, so I promise you.
All right. So you can't buy tickets to that TED Talk because that happened back in, what was it, April or something like
April
that?
27th.
April 27th.
But it is available on YouTube. So.
Yeah, and you can watch it on your site. It's about a 3.5-hour video, and you got to go in about 15 minutes to catch Rachel's talk. The other talks don't have anything to do with cannabis, really, but they're interesting.
They are
I like
very interesting, yeah.
So, again, if people are interested in coming down and finding out the secret of the endocannabinoid system in your introduction to endocannabinology, they go to what website?
DrKnox.com/events.
DrKnox.com/events. So you can find out more there. And if you have any question or comment for us tonight, if hopefully the phone lines are open, you can call us at 503-288-4442. You can also have people you know all around the world can watch us at facebook.com/restorehemp. That's facebook.com/restorehemp. And the show's archived at youtube.com/cannabiscommonsense. But you can't watch it live there. So next week, Dr. Knox will be back. We're sure of that. And we're hopeful that either or his wife and daughter, who are also physicians, will be here as well. So tune in next week. What is that, the 26th? I think it's the 27th.
26th.
Yeah.
From today. Yep.
Yeah, so you can tune in next week as well and tell your friends to tune in if you have questions about the endocannabinoid system, medical marijuana, medicine in general. You can call us at 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. If you have questions about how to find a doctor to help you with medical marijuana, not just here in Oregon in the Northwest, but anywhere in the country, we do have a physician referral service. You can call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. So we're down to about 13 minutes left here.
All right.
We have another video, actually, from the NBC Today Show featuring Megyn Kelly. I don't think we can run the whole 9.5 minutes, but I think we should go ahead and try to run a little bit of that. It's pretty entertaining, seeing you guys on national television. So here is the Today Show. What was that? Was that January of last year?
It was
or February?
Actually, it was March.
It's March.
I think there was a few weeks delay from taping it to when they actually put it on air. But yeah, we liked that video just because you know, some of the presentation about the patient experience was I think very useful in the introduction and all. But,
well, here's that video. We'll be right back.
Yeah. All right.
And half the states in the union now have legalized medical marijuana. But did you know that you do not have to get high to consume it? And that it is helping some folks avoid the opioid vortex altogether. So many people have questions about medical pot and have no idea who to ask or still feel uncomfortable even doing it. Enter the Knox family, all doctors practicing conventional medicine until they saw a need in their community. Watch this.
Meet the Knox family. A family of MDs, but how these doctors treat patients might surprise you.
The cannabis is really helping.
They counsel on cannabis.
We call what we do in the clinics integrative cannabinoid medicine because we know that cannabis is not the thing that's helping people heal. It is a tool that helps the body really heal itself.
all of these people had either failed conventional medicine or conventional medicine had failed them.
Janice was asked to fill in at a medical marijuana center in Portland, Oregon.
Of course, I had my preconceived notions about people who used marijuana. They just wanted to get high and be stoners. But when I went there, who I saw totally just rocked my conventional medicine world. I was so enthralled that I just started learning.
Meanwhile, their daughters were graduating from medical school with MDs and MBAs.
At first, I was sort of like, Mom's doing something crazy again. But as she continued to talk to us about the patients she was seeing and the changes she was seeing in these patients from using cannabis medicine, I think both Rachel and I sort of got hooked. Oh, like look at the changes that are happening in these patients that in a primary care clinic we weren't seeing with our own patients.
Their clinic helps answer questions from what form to take medical marijuana in,
I'm trying new products now.
to how much.
Reduce the amount of THC that you take.
Yeah. They see patients of all ages and ailments, from cancer
Chronic neck pain.
Yes.
to chronic pain. Even a 15-month-old baby with an inoperable brain tumor named Daxton Olson.
We went through the why us phase for so long. The doctors told us that there was nothing in their arsenal to shrink the tumor.
Daxton was put on a chemotherapy regimen, but after 3 months of treatments and some complications, the tumor had grown. Daxton also suffered from daily seizures.
It's such a weird thing to even consider as a parent. Like, am I really going to give my 3-month-old son cannabis?
And then as soon as we got him on cannabis, we did another 3 months of chemotherapy, and his tumor shrunk 26%. His seizures have gone down from 15 a day to 1 every 2 weeks.
Look at you, you've grown so much.
Daxton's doctors told us they credit the chemotherapy for shrinking his tumor, but say they can't rule out that the cannabis is also helping.
Little one.
The more conventional thought is that cannabis could be used as a last resort, but I really firmly believe there's a number of conditions that it should be your first resort.
The doctors of our generation, we want to be bold and courageous, and the changes that cannabis does make in people's lives even more compelling for us as people who want to be healers.
Wow. Janice, Rachel, Jessica, and David Knox, welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here. A family full of doctors. We got a bunch of doctors here. All right, so let me start with you on this, Janice. You don't prescribe medical marijuana, so describe what you do.
Well, it's still federally illegal, so we're not allowed to prescribe the plant. However, we are allowed to assess patients for their medical conditions. If they have a condition that qualifies them to get a state-issued medical marijuana card, then we can do that. But with that, we have to examine their records, examine the patient, just the usual things we do with conventional medicine. We still have to perform those tasks.
Mm-hmm. How unique is this, Rachel? How unique is this service that you guys are doing?
Oh, extraordinarily unique. You know, before we got started, patients could go to a clinic and get a card. They would get evaluated. It might take 5 to 10 minutes. But what we decided to do, because patients have so many questions on what to use, how to use it, when to use it, we started counseling them on their use, using the very pragmatic information that we were able to glean from the current trials and studies that have been done to help really narrow.
All right, so there's the Today Show. We got to thank them and make a fair use disclosure. We're using that under the fair use exemption to copyright laws. I reached out to the NBC Today Show and sought permission, but they never replied. So I wasn't that diligent in keeping up to it. Maybe I'll do some more before you come back next week. So we have a caller who's standing by who has a question. Welcome to the show, caller.
Hi.
Hi.
So we have a caller who's standing by.
Turn down your TV and just listen to us through the phone. There's a 6-second delay. So do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, well, I have a question.
Okay.
I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I have chronic pain. I wanted to know if it would benefit to get a green card.
I'll let you answer that.
All right. Well, yes, we think that there's a lot of benefit to it. One, Chronic pain is probably our number one problem that when we see most of our patients for. People have a lot of success with it as far as manage their pain. Type 2 diabetes, has any number of associated complications we see from peripheral neuropathy that can be very helpful. There's some preliminary evidence that even CBD in particular can help with regulating your blood sugar, and so we think there's really a role for cannabis use with those conditions. So you get a card, it helps you particularly with procuring your product. You avoid the tax situation that you see at the dispensaries.
You can name a family member or friend to grow for you as well.
Absolutely.
Which is cheaper than buying it.
Absolutely.
Usually. So if you're interested in getting a referral to see a doctor, you can call our office at 503-235-4606.
All right, hold on. I'm going to hand the phone to my wife and have you give.
Well, it's right there on the screen. See, right there. It's right there.
Oh, right there.
So yeah, just call us there, and we'll be happy to refer you to a doctor. Thank you for calling. Do you have any other questions or anything?
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I have a little show and tell segment right now for some hemp products here on the desk. This is hempcrete. It's the stems of the marijuana plant mixed with powdered limestone or quicklime, and it makes a concrete material much like concrete but lighter and stronger than concrete. We have a little piece of a hemp stem here. Here is a ball of hemp twine, and so this is the wick for next week's Hemp Flame for Freedom. We have some hemp oil here. The reason that marijuana is illegal has really nothing to do with drugs. The drugs were just a smokescreen. Marijuana prohibition was never really about drugs. It's about money, power, and the continued centralization of economic and political control. It's mainly about this, the fact that you can power your engines and make all the energy that we use for petroleum with about 10% of the world's cultivated land today. It's the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist ruling class that created marijuana prohibition to benefit the few at the expense of the many. Right next door to it, we have a little package of cannabis. This was a block, an ounce of cannabis, where people from Park Davis, a company still in existence in Detroit, they told you how to make your own tincture using this raw cannabis. This is powdered extract of cannabis, or hashish, also from Park Davis. It's about 120 years old, and then right next to it we have a cannabis tincture number 17. Both Park Davis and Eli Lilly had about 20 plus different medical cannabis products. And so even though it says poisonous on the top here, later bottles said not poisonous, though formerly thought to be so. Right next to it, we have a nifty recreation bottle. This was created back in the early 1970s by the British Pharmacological Association. So this is a replica of a apothecary bottle that was produced by the British Pharmacological Association to promote their 100th anniversary, I believe it was. And right next to it, we have what is my oldest and biggest medical marijuana container. I've had this for about 12 years, and this is going to be its final appearance on the show because the Cannabis Museum in Athens, Ohio, has purchased this bottle, and I turned it into my rent. And so, but it's going to a nice museum. I've sold about 150 pieces of my collection. I still have a couple hundred left, though. But this one is going off to the Cannabis Museum in Athens, Ohio. It is from 1840, from London. And so this is one of the original bottles that was filled with cannabis oil extract and shipped from India to London, and used to introduce cannabis to Western pharmacopoeia. So here is a commemorative bottle from the British Pharmacological Association and a British an Indian bottle of cannabis indica. And I'm going to miss this one, but at least it will be in a nice museum. So there you go. And I had my rent in April paid, which is always good.
Always good.
So we're down to just a minute. To go and find out about your event is doctorsknox.com/events.
Yeah, exactly.
And people can apply for a scholarship. I want to thank you for coming on. We'll have you back next week. Maybe you can bring some of the women of the household.
Exactly. You can focus on them, and I'll stay in the background.
Oh, no, we'll focus on all of you.
All right.
Thank you. John Cornett is going to take us out. Tune in next week and help us restore hemp.
Did you know the sun will shine one day? Everything on earth will melt away. All the oceans rise above the land, drowning every woman.
There's a camera up there. You can wave that.
Whoa, let's make the best of it now. We'll be just another asteroid floating through the mind of Sigmund Freud.